welcome to Women's Broadcast Television Expert Spotlight Show. We are the all-women's internet television station with content created by women for women. Today, we're featuring Stacey Blanchet. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself here in a minute, but let me tell you a little bit about her because I'm so excited. She is, wait till you hear her credentials. It's unbelievable. She's the owner and creative director of Blanchet Designs. And it was a creative director from 2012, 2013, 2014 for the Emmys, and 2013 for the Oscars and Grammys. That is so cool in itself. But listen to this. She's also senior fashion editor of Trend Privé magazine, executive producer and host of In the Know web series, executive producer of Living Large with Anicia, and executive producer of The Journey to Myself, she's author of that book as well, and executive producer of Three Moms and a Napkin. She's also a professional writer of Romantic Encounters in 2012, a published writer for numerous international fashion magazines, and the owner of Your Own Girl Friday. This is unbelievable. Thank you, Stacey, for meeting with us today.
Thank you very much, Jane, for having me. I really appreciate that. That's quite an introduction. I never think about it too much.
It's a phenomenal resume, and I know there's a lot of ladies out there that just want to pick your brain about fashion. But we're going to talk about a lot today. So, the first thing I really like to start with on our shows that makes the most sense, women like to bond with each other, and the way we bond is building a relationship. So if you could tell us just a little bit about yourself, your childhood, and just kind of a summary of your story to where we are today, because that had a big influence on your life and how you pursued your career.
Well, back in 2000, I believe somewhere around 2005, 2006, I published a story called The Journey to Myself. I have always been what I call a very private person in terms of sharing details about what happened in my childhood. But one of the things that happened for me was that my mother was getting remarried in my 40s. And while everybody loved the man that she was remarrying, and I liked him as well, I started having all of these really weird feelings during the wedding ceremonies. I couldn't do a toast. Every time I would go to open my mouth, I'd start to cry. Every time I would want to say something, and I realized I was hanging on to wanting my parents to get back together. When I was 11 years old, they had divorced. And it caught me by surprise because I was never the kind of person that ever looked back. And so I decided to go back and take a look and become the journey to myself. What was it that led me to where I am today? And by the time I was 11, my mom had already been divorced twice, but it was my mom's second husband that we considered to be our father. Even though I have my real dad, I really bonded with my stepdad. And that marriage came as a surprise to me in terms of the breakup, because I thought we were a very, very happy family. I never saw my parents fighting. I never saw them unkind to each other. There was never any harsh words. And so to shield my brother and I from the move, which was very devastating to us, to move out of the house and all that type of stuff, my mom thought to send us to my aunt and uncle on an Indian reservation in Montana. And on the surface, this wouldn't look to be anything other than a great adventure, because we'd already been with my aunt and uncle on multiple occasions. We traveled across country with them. We went to Yellowstone. We lived in Lake Tahoe. We did whitewater rafting with them. But I'm not really quite sure why this particular summer my uncle chose to sexually abuse me. And when I came back from that summer, I told my family, and this was 1975, so I like to put that in content of the year that this was, because this is not 1983 or even the 90s on how we deal differently with this subject matter. But back in the 1970s, most people just didn't deal with this. They sort of swept it under the rug. And it's unfortunate because that becomes part of your identity, and you're not able to as a child, in my opinion, really process what happens to you. So you're left really all alone, not really validated in terms of letting people know that they believed you, that you were worth fighting for, that you were worth doing something for. That plays into your self-esteem. Now, that's debatable as to whether or not my self-esteem has played a part in my life. I would say no. Some people might say yes. Whether or not it affected me in the decisions that I made along the way, I really have no idea in terms of, I would think that my therapy in the years, but one of the things that's unique about my situation, and I'm more than happy to go into with people, is that I met a therapist at 19, and what he decided to do was to remove me from the situation. He filed charges against my uncle against my wishes, and in turn doing that caused my family to take sides. And my father's side, which my uncle was on, they chose to take my uncle's side. And when that happened, I was given a choice to stay in the family and accept my uncle or leave the family. And I chose to leave the family. So I left the family at the age of 19, and I never looked back. And, I'm 51, and I can honestly say I've never had contact except for a couple of times throughout my life. Funerals of my grandparents, I did see them. But other than that, my real father, and I have never had contact since I was 19, except for at those funerals. But, what that does for you on top of everything else, and I think it actually helped me because it allowed me to reshape myself. It allowed me to become a new person. It allowed me to validate myself and say I mattered. It allowed me to carry on a life without having to face the person that did these things to me, and to face the family that chose not to fight for me, but instead go on his side. Now, do I believe the family didn't believe me? No, I actually think they did believe me. I just don't think they knew exactly what to do about it. Mm-hmm. Now, I always say to everybody that it comes in the Journey to Myself, the documentary that I did, I say it's very important how you were raised early on. If you're validated when you're a kid, and I'm saying between maybe 1 and 5, or when you're born to 5, if you're validated, that stays with you for life. That's where your self-esteem comes from. I was lucky enough to be able to draw back from that. So if I looked at my childhood as a whole, I can even find positives about the times that I spent with my aunt and my uncle, because, we went whitewater rafting. I was on an Indian reservation for a summer, and you can take all of the great things. And I had one stain that really stays with me for life. And I'm sure it's played out in a lot of ways. I mean, I think the boundary issues probably play out in a lot of ways. I'm not a very huggy person. You can't really touch me unless I allow you to come into my space. But I tell people, because they ask me all the time, how do you get over it? You don't ever get over it. You just learn to live with it. And if you're willing to own your decisions, it's much easier to live with. And I don't have a problem with explaining myself to people if they think that I've done something that's, slighted them, or if I've come across as cold or anything like that. I'm okay with that. At 51, I'm actually really okay with where I'm at. But I know I get a lot of people, and I think that I get a lot of people that come to me that are very broken, want to know how to get out of it. It's because they never left the situation. They're still stuck in it. They're still having to face the person. They're still not being validated by whomever it was that they told. And I really think in a lot of ways that Jerry Olympic saved me. I don't know. I might have been into drugs, alcohol, multiple marriages, not being able to have a happy, healthy life had I not been removed from the situation. I think that was a big key. And, at the time I was doing it, I didn't know that. There was a lot of dark years there. I mean, that was painful to lose my only family that I had ever known. To be out on my own at 19 is very, very difficult. I still have my mom and my mom's side of the family, but my dad's side of the family was really my family. I mean, that was my whole life. My whole identity was wrapped up in them. So it's just, you know, the journey to myself written piece stops at 22. So everybody wants to know what happened to that girl. You know, it's like, how do you explain what happened to that girl? So we did a documentary 4 years ago, catching everybody up to what happened to that girl. So there's great lessons there. There's heartbreak. There's people I've hurt along the way. There's decisions that I've made that have been life-altering decisions that I have to stick with for the rest of my life. But I think that the important thing to remember is it's just life. It's life for everybody. We've all made those decisions. Everybody's got something that changed them, altered them, for whatever, that they carry with them for life. And they're going to make decisions based on that. And I'm not so much content with living the perfect life. I'm content with living a contentful life where I am just at peace with decisions come my way.
Well, you know, it's amazing because there's so many that can go through so much and never recover.
Yeah.
And you see them daily and you talk to them daily. They're 60, 70, still hurt. And that is, you know, it's so sad to me. And so I think, you know, why you're such an inspiration to me and so many others that are going to see your story is, you know, that's who you were. And then you said, okay, who's after 22? And look at all that you've accomplished. How do you now tell us a little bit, kind of fast forward, and then we'll fill in the gaps. Because how do you go from, you know, your book and your story and getting past, you know, the parents and not having, you know, anybody there really to help support you in any of this, and you've accomplished so much. You know, how do you do that? And so I guess we'll start with where you are today, and then how you will fill in those gaps.
Well, you know, where I'm at today really is building blocks. And I tell everybody, I'm what I call a job jumper. A lot of my friends like to stay at the same job. They've been doing the same job for 20 years, you know, typing on the same computer, collecting that, you know, 10 cents a year raise, that, you know, the cost of living raise that you get. And I made a decision very early on. My first job was at a corporation. I was 22, and I was happy. I mean, I was getting pensions. I had 401ks. I had my healthcare insurance, and I mean, I could have stayed there for life, right? But I hit 27, and I realized this wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want to be one of the people that had been there for 30 years. And I was like freaking out. I was way too comfortable. And I decided to quit my job and take off on a trip around the world for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
So now I'm going to be fair about this, because that decision was looked upon by everyone in my family as being the stupidest decision alive.
Oh, I'm sure.
No, I mean, everybody knows I was looked upon. My grandparents could not believe what I was going to do. They thought, how could you leave a good job, not know where you're going to end up, or even know where you're going to fall? You know, and these decisions do hurt you later on in life. But at the time I did it, I really didn't care. I went to my boss. I was the only one that didn't want their job there. Everybody wanted their job. And I said, if there's going to be layoffs, I want to be the first one to go. Let everybody else keep their job. I'll go. I'll figure it out. I don't know how, but I figured it out that I can live off of $16,000 a year. I lived in a room. I can live off of root beer and sunflower seeds if necessary. But I figured out that I can live in the bare minimum. I really didn't need to have much. Now, I'm very lucky because I have my family. I have my parents who support all my crazy decisions, and they are crazy. I mean, when they start out, they're crazy. They're like, you know, Stacey, what are you going to do now, you know? I've got a brother who works in Morgan Stanley, very conservative, just totally worried about me all the time. You know, who's going to take care of you when you get to be 80? You know, it's like, you know, how are you going to handle all this? But then I have other people that are like, you know, woohoo, you go, girl, have fun. So it's, you know, it's like a mixed bag. But you have to, in my opinion, every job that I took was always a job to make more money and to give me a new skill. So I've always been in the private sector until I hit my 40s, but I did the private sector where I would pick up legal skills, construction skills, not manual labor skills, but how to do like the finances, how to do the paperwork, marketing, project management. Those skills stay with you for life. You never lose them. You can go into any industry with those skill sets. So I decided, to do that. And the book was something that came along when I was 28. I came back from traveling. I was back in San Diego for a couple of months. I wrote this book about a relationship that I had had and all the romantic things that I did for this person. And I decided, not knowing how to do a book, I just put it together and shipped it off to 40 editors in New York City. I bought the New York City directory, and I didn't know how to do it.
I love it.
I can tell you that 98% of them came back unopened because it was not the correct way to do it. 2 never came back, and I think 1 came back telling me to go get a book and learn how to do this correctly.
Oh.
So I piled all of it in my closet, and I just figured, I'll get around to it some other day. And about 3 years later, out of the blue, in my mailbox comes a guy who said he saw my book 3 years earlier, and he was starting a brand new website called enovel.com. And this is way before Kindle or anything. And he said, I think your book would be great on my site. I'll give you standard publishing rights, which would be you collect 50% of what's sold. I take the other 50%. But he needed to have it in a digital form. I had hand-drawn my book.
Oh, wow.
Hired graphic design artists to do that. And so he did all the marketing, and I sold 480 copies of this book. It was only $4. So he was like, it was nothing.
Fantastic, though.
I mean, how that guy found me, I'll never know. I mean, he remembered me from 3 years earlier. So that's kind of, that's blind luck. That is, it's blind luck. And I'll tell you one other story that not a lot of people know. How I got the Emmys when I started doing Blanchet designs, I put an ad on Craigslist a year prior to the Emmys. And I said, anyone who's walking the red carpet, I'll design a dress for you for free.
Wow.
So, the producers.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it was something out of the box. Nobody would ever think to do something like that.
Yeah.
And it caught the attention of the producers of the Emmys.
Wow.
So they invited me to come and do some dresses for the women wives of the Emmys, and they also allowed me to attend the Emmys. So I attended the Emmys for 3 years running with 2 of my models wearing my designs along with the people walking the red carpet. And that all came from Craigslist. That's... You
set intention, you put it out there, and it was answered. So that's beautiful.
And I met some really incredible people from that ad.
Right.
Directors and people that I would never meet in the real world in terms of, it's just not my world. I'm not Hollywood. So I got a chance to meet people that are now my friends to this day, that are in television, that are in movies. And that's how I started building my network. So when I have an idea for something, I talk to my friends about it. Mm-hmm. Extremely open because they know me. So I always start by it's don't burn bridges. Really take a look at your networks and build from your networks. And I'm not a threat to them. I'm not in their industry. I'm not trying to take their job. So they're more than happy to share information with me or help me in any way, shape, form. And one thing has just led to another. That's how I'm saying it's a building block. It's just, it's just being in the right place at the right time and having the skill set to do it the correct way.
I always say expertise plus opportunity equals success.
Yes, yes.
And because if you're ready and something happens and you know how to do it, then that's successful.
Well, I also think a lot of times...
I like building blocks too.
Oh, sorry. I think people are always trying to look for that moment, and they don't realize that moment very rarely ever comes for everybody.
Yeah.
You have to really make the moment. And it could take years to make that moment. Or it may never come. So I always start by, don't wait for that perfect opportunity. Create that perfect opportunity. Learn from your mistakes.
I love that. I love that. What is your, what are you most grateful for? You've been through a lot, and there's a lot of accomplishments you've had. If you could pinpoint, maybe a situation, a moment in your life, or maybe something that's happened to you, what are you most grateful for now in your life?
Well, I will go back to my family, because my parents, my mom and my stepdad really are the rock of everything. And I run everything for them. They're both attorneys, so they're very practical. They sort of kind of keep me grounded. They don't let me go off on a tangent and spend $150,000 and have no return from it. So they're the ones that are going to bring me back. But they get so excited, because they're getting. My mom got a chance to go to the Elton John Oscar party with me this year.
Nice.
World, do you get a chance to do something like? She is like over the moon.
I bet she loved that.
It was just so much fun. So it's like, when do you get a chance to do these kinds of things? And having, like you said, meet the moment, having the money and the opportunity to be able to do these things. So, they'll listen to everything I say. They'll say, well, what are you thinking? I was approached about 4 years ago to do a reality TV show, and a production company came to me. It was a lot of money they were offering me, which is pretty standard now, what they were offering. And I took the contract to my dad, and I said, this is what's being offered to me. And he said, well, what do you want to do? You want to do television? You want to do fashion designing? And I said, well, I really don't know. I never thought about doing television. I really have no interest in it. And he goes, well, then don't do it.
Do fashion design. That's right.
Fashion designer. And but going over the contract and being able to have somebody there that's practical, that can look at it, is really great. And if I had gone in that direction, they would have been right there behind me, cheering me on.
Right. So that's wonderful. So we don't have a lot of time left. We're going to have you back, Stacey.
Mm-hmm.
But I do want you to talk about In the Know, because that's a web series that you created, I think 6 episodes.
Yeah.
And we can find it with you, but you can also find it on WBTN. So tell us a little bit about In the Know.
Well, In the Know started on this idea with the magazine, is that a lot of people think it is so easy to get these things done, that you can go from A to B and be extremely successful, and there's no process in between. So I have friends of mine that are in the fashion entertainment industry that would normally not give access because they're busy. They're actually working.
Right.
I talked to them, and I said, what? I really want to get into the process. I want to educate people on what the actual process is. Let's say,
I love that.
You get a record deal. What does that really mean to get a record deal? What does that really take to get a record deal? So I have a friend of mine who managed Snoop Dogg, Macy Gray. His name is Jason Edmonds. He's actually in the industry. He manages these bands. He produces their albums. He is on the road with his own band, and Babyface is his uncle. So he's been in the industry for 20 plus years. So I said, Jason, I want you to sit down. I want you to tell people and educate them on what this really means. And he was kind enough to sit down for a 2-hour interview, and we went through everything. We went through, how does YouTube play a role in this? How much does it really cost to cut a record? It's not free. You got to pay for the studio. You got to pay for management. You got to pay for. So the record companies are no longer paying that. And I think a lot of people get very confused that they can actually do these things for free. And Sherry Belafonte was one of my guests, and she came on and talked about human rights and what it means to be an African-American woman in Hollywood.
I love it.
And coming from a human rights family and trying to separate yourself from a famous father by creating your own identity. This stuff is really, it's very, very difficult. Plus, I brought on people that had business models of skincare lines. You can't walk down the street without seeing a skincare line that's promising to take away your wrinkles.
So true.
So the idea that you're going to be able to make $50 to $70 million a year, unless you're Chanel or the big brands, gone. See ya. Bye-bye. But I have somebody who makes a lot of money and is very well known in Hollywood, and her business model can't even be duplicated anymore because she's already in. But she's had 20 years of working on that business model.
Right.
So it helps to have people that are successful, because maybe somebody's going to get something out of these episodes that normally they wouldn't get. I have one on there on how to find your soulmate. I have a friend of mine, her name is Ariel Ford, and she is credited for putting together 33,000 people with their soulmates just in the last 10 years with her books and all her type of stuff. Now, my question to her, I wanted to come to it from a different level, was with all the information that's out there, why is divorce on the rise? Why aren't people finding their soulmate? You can go anywhere and find information on how to have a successful relationship. Why aren't people having successful relationships? And
That's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, it's questions that I want to know because I've never been married. I don't have kids. And so what are my reasons for not having a marriage? I mean, that's something different in itself. But, whether you believe in marriage or maybe it all plays into my childhood, I don't even know it. I bring it forward in all my relationships. But what makes some people successful and most not?
So that's In the Know web series. That's awesome.
So I ask the hard questions. I want these people to really bring their stuff.
Well, I hope you guys watch her series. And we're going to have Stacey back on because we have to still dive into a lot of information that I want you guys to know about Stacey. So we'll schedule Stacey for another week or so. And so you'll come back and watch Stacey, some more of her interview. I want her now, though, to tell you how you can find her. So if you want to reach out to her, let us know your website, your email, whatever you want to put out there for everybody.
Well, if they want to know personally about me, my website is staceyblanchet.com. So that's tells about the movies, the journey to myself, my writing, the magazine, everything. So it's staceyblanchet.com. If they want to know about the business part of when I do PR, marketing, brand development, Your Own Girl Friday, yourownGirlFriday.com is that website. So I try to keep everything separate, but yet they kind of mix together. So people can find me either way. Both websites kind of hooked together, but I like to kind of keep my business and my personal separate.
Oh, that's wonderful. And we'll have more information on the website below her video as well. And to spell her name correctly, you can see that on the bottom of the screen. So you just visit her website to get in touch with Stacey. And we sure appreciate you being on Women's Broadcast Television Network. And Stacey, we will have you back. I promise that, okay? We still have a lot to talk about. Thank you for joining us today.